This episode of Around the Oval is brought to you by Todd Pennington with Revolution Mortgage.
Hey, Ohio State fans, Alex Gleitman here, back with another edition of Around the Oval brought to you by Todd Pennington with Revolution Mortgage. It has certainly been a week in the Big Ten. The world kind of got rocked last week when out of nowhere, seemingly, it was announced that both USC and UCLA were applying to become members of the Big Ten. Just hours later, it was confirmed that the chancellors had voted. The Bruins and the Trojans were both admitted, unsurprisingly, into the conference shortly after USC, UCLA putting stuff out on social media, press releases, and then the media frenzy has kind of ensued since then. And so we've talked about it almost ad nauseum on BuckeyesCoop.com, but getting a little bit of a fresh take on this new conference expansion and conference realignment kind of news and point of view, we bring on Chris Trevino from the USC 247 sports site, Peristyle, USC expert, insider, former colleague of mine. Chris, thanks for joining. Appreciate your time.
Alex, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, of course. And, it's always good to reconnect, but especially when you get to talk about news like this. I mean, from our perspective, we had kind of been hearing a little bit that when you talk about conference expansion, that USC could be in play or could at least be a target of the Big Ten, which makes sense for so many reasons. Obviously, kind of the crown jewel of the Pac-12 at the time, and bringing that LA market, expanding west. Right now, Nebraska is the furthest west program in the Big Ten, which might need its own rebrand and new name itself, but I guess from your perspective, how shocked were you when the news broke that USC was going to be joining the Big Ten?
I mean, like you had said, there had been sort of whispers and sort of murmurs about, possibly the Big Ten, but it was super on the low. I think we reported something on our page maybe a couple weeks ago, but it was sort of maybe lost in the heyday of all that. And it was quite shocking because, you can hear stuff, but then when it actually happens, you see that tweet and you see that news, you sort of realize what just happened. Sort of, the two, or USC being the crown jewel of the Pac-12, is leaving the Pac-12 and what that does to that conference and what that does for the Big Ten and what that does for, college football in general. It's a giant tidal wave that we're still feeling it. We're still feeling those reverberations, and we're going to keep feeling it for the next couple of months. And it was quite shocking. We were standing there, we were covering the Elite 11 when the tweet went out, and we had to scramble to get over to our studio to do an emergency podcast. We scrapped what we were doing. That's how serious it was. So obviously we had to go, we had to react to this, but it's not surprising because, as you had mentioned, USC has been in these conversations for a while in terms of the fan base and media talking heads. Should USC go independent? Should USC look to join another conference? Because obviously they are a blue blood program. I know we can argue where they stand among, the top five, but they're up there. They're somewhere up there with the Ohio States and the Alabamas and the Notre Dames. And they weren't getting treated like a blue blood in the Pac-12 in terms of the money, in terms of the respect they have at the national level. And it didn't help that they were in a Pac-12 program or a Pac-12 conference that was struggling and was sort of a laughing stock. So they wanted to be respected and regarded to what they once were when they were, beating teams all over the country. And obviously USC didn't do their part in some regards of that, having a lackluster admin, having some incompetent hires at the head coaching level, but still USC is a major brand in college football. They need that money. They see the money that the Big Ten and the SEC are getting, and USC deserves a bigger chunk than they were getting in the Pac-12. And so it's not surprising that they decided to, we see the writing on the wall. We see the future of the Pac-12, and it's not great. We see the future of college football, and it's moving towards super conferences. We got to jump on it now.
Yeah. And I think, when you talk about some of the misguided hires, the administration, things like that, I mean, they seem to, and we don't know until we see the product on the field over the next few years, but I think everyone in college football can agree the move of going out and kind of making a statement move and getting Lincoln Riley, and the way he's been able to kind of change the course or the trajectory of what the program looks like recruiting and getting transfers like Jordan Addison and things of that nature. Obviously, Caleb Williams. So not only helping the now, but, you look at Malachi Nelson and all the different, the way that USC is now viewed again with a competent head coach who's been to the college football playoff, one of the hottest young names in the game. And I think much safer than the Lane Kiffin hire that would fall under one of those misguided hires. I think, you put all that investment and you're kind of putting all your trust in the future of the program behind Lincoln Riley. I think it was only right for the administration to now make this move to ensure the safety and the profitability and the stability of the program by making this move to the Big Ten. So I'm aligned with everything you said. I guess my biggest question, I'm in Jersey, so I guess I'm technically in Big Ten country, but obviously Ohio State in the heart of Big Ten country in the Midwest in Columbus, Ohio. I've seen on our board, other sites, other fan bases, friends that I've talked to that went to Big Ten schools. I think everyone is pretty excited about this move, but what has been the sentiment out West inside the USC program that you've talked to, fans, recruits, UCLA, any sources you have there? What's kind of been the sentiment about this move? Is this something they're excited about? Is it kind of a necessary evil? How are they viewing the move to the Big Ten?
Yeah, just starting sort of on the USC side of things with the, inside the admin and whatever, or what have you, they're all for it. This means a lot more money that'll be coming into the administration. A lot of things they can get done because of the, the new contracts that they're going to have and the money that they bring in. They can help other programs. They can upgrade facilities. They can make more hires, more support staff, more all those things. So from that perspective, they're all fired up about it. They're excited for this new challenge. Going to, I've used the word incompetent a couple of times already, but going to a competent conference with a competent commissioner and be able to be part of something that's nationally renowned and something that has a lot of respect at the college football level, and kind of get out of that Pac-12 and move on to the next chapter for this admin. And as far as the fans go, this was actually really surprising because we did a poll on Thursday when the news broke. I believe it was Thursday. All the days blend together, but we did a poll on social media on our Twitter. Just, what do you feel? Are you happy with this move? And we were actually, me and Ryan Abraham, our publisher, we were kind of shocked at the results, that it was 54% said, yes, we're happy. And it was more 46 said, no, we're not. So it was sort of a 50-50 split. We were expecting somewhere between maybe 80 to 90 approval rating for this. So I think what we're seeing is sort of that older fan base is sort of, holding on to, the traditions of, the conference that USC's called home for over 100 years, the rivalries, the West Coast, just the Pac-12 in general. And to see college football, it is based in tradition, based in history for the most part. And, it's tough to kind of see those things be pushed to the side and go chase the money, if you will, and go to the Big Ten. USC is not a Big Ten school. It's a Pac-12 school. And that's how people see it. So I think that's what you're seeing, sort of that older generation of college football fans that are holding on to that idea of college football history. But more so on our site, which is more so the diehard fans and not sort of maybe the casual fans on social media, it was more 70%, which is a little bit closer to what we were expecting. For the most part, a lot of fans are excited about what this means for the future of the football program in terms of USC taking football seriously again and hopefully getting back to, competing for national championships, competing in the college football playoff. This is one of those steps towards that. So for the most part, they're on board with it.
Yeah, it makes sense when you think about UCLA with USC if you're taking two, right? I mean, obviously rivals. There's a lot of history there. There's, I love that game every year where they both wear their colored jerseys. It's so cool. And obviously UCLA with the storied basketball tradition too is a really nice addition. But I think some people were maybe a little, a lot of Big Ten people, they think football. They're not necessarily thinking basketball, and they maybe preferred Oregon as a pair to bring to the Big Ten, maybe get like closer to that Seattle market, that Portland market, right? And kind of rope in that fan base. What was kind of the sentiment on that end? Were were fans, at least, even the ones that didn't love the move, were they excited that at least UCLA was coming with them to kind of preserve that rivalry? Were they hoping that maybe it's like, well, UCLA hasn't really been the best in football, maybe we should have brought Oregon with us? What was kind of the POV on that?
While obviously USC fans do not like UCLA, obviously there's that rivalry there. I think they understood and respected that USC and UCLA are intertwined for the most part. They are rivals. They are a traditional rival. They are a historic rival in college football. So it just makes sense that they go together into this new chapter. And it also just makes sense from a money standpoint. If you're the Big Ten, you want both of those LA markets. You want both of those schools in that LA market. So from perspective of that sense, I think it just makes sense that they go together. They're intertwined in that respect. And I know USC fans probably won't admit it, but there is sort of like this big brother, little brother thing where you can hate each other, but you're still part of the same, you're still bonded in that sense, if that makes sense. So there is sort of some level of respect for that rivalry and, being a part of that. So I think a lot of people are excited. They still get to, live that historic rivalry because it is one of those marquee games in college football. Maybe not as, exciting as, the Alabama, Auburn or Ohio State, Michigan, but it is still a marquee rivalry. And that's something that those older USC fans can at least hold on to that are upset about leaving the Pac-12 is they still will have, that traditional game.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't personally imagine a world where Ohio State left the Big Ten and Michigan didn't come with them. Or, as you said, Alabama leaves the SEC and Auburn doesn't come with them. So, I totally get that perspective. And I think it makes a lot of sense. And as you said, it kind of preserves the traditionalists and keeps them a little bit happy to some extent versus, just completely abandoning some of the, Pitt and West Virginia are now in two different conferences. And that used to be, a awesome rivalry game every single year. And they just don't play it anymore because they're, Pitt's in the ACC and West Virginia's in the Big 12. And so that's not something that you want to happen. You don't want to lose, that kind of traditional part of the rivalry.
Well, just to jump back with the Oregon thing, because I know you mentioned them, but I get the sense that USC does not want Oregon to be part of this. That one is more sense like more hatred is the vibe. If UCLA is the kind of the little brother, Oregon's that mean kid up the street that they just do not like each other and they just want to be petty. They don't want them in there with them. And I think that's kind of the sense. And you see a lot of reports now over the last, week or so. It's more like, Notre Dame's the number one target followed by Oregon. But now you're seeing reports that it's like, don't expect Oregon to be in the Big Ten, So I think there's a level of, and the behind the scenes where it's like USC does not want Oregon to come with them to the Big Ten. They want them to kick rocks and go somewhere else.
And that's an interesting take because obviously, you don't get that perspective in Big Ten country. That's not how they're viewing it. They just want the most exciting, most competitive football league that's going to be fun to watch and maybe have some cool road trips. But talking about Oregon, I mean, how weird would it be to see a US, like, I think eventually the structure of how the bowl system works is going to change. But right now it's, and probably when USC enters, it's going to be the Big Ten versus the Pac-12 in the Rose Bowl, pending that's not a playoff game and pending that, other teams aren't selected if one makes the playoffs. How weird would it be to see a USC versus Oregon Rose Bowl matchup?
I can already imagine all of the columns and the talking heads talking about how weird it's going to be. I think it'll be weird until like halftime and then we'll all get over it and it'll just be part of the norm. It's always going to have that sort of, I'm not sure what's going on here. This is weird to look at, but it's the new norm. We will accept it. I think it'll blend in after, a couple of touchdowns and a couple of quarters go by. I think everyone will be fine with it and accept it moving forward.
Yeah, definitely. And another hot button topic that's come up a bunch has been recruiting. And there's and I can see the arguments for both sides. Like some people are saying, this is great for Ohio State recruiting. Now, like technically their footprint and the conference footprint expands out west. It's going to be easier to get California prospects to come to Ohio State. On the contrary, some people are saying it's going to make it easier for USC and UCLA to recruit areas outside of their traditional West Coast footprint, because now you could go to little Johnny in Cleveland, Ohio and say, hey, I know it was really tough for you to come all the way out to USC before because your parents, would have to travel to basically see all your games. But half the games you see every season are going to be drivable for your parents now, if not more than that. So, I could see, and maybe both are going to be right. Maybe it does help, Ohio State, Michigan a little bit expand their footprint. There's more visibility on an every Saturday basis of those programs with the high school kids and things like that. And maybe it does help USC and UCLA. I tend to think it's going to help USC and UCLA much more than it will help any other school in the Big Ten, but just wanted to get your take on that one.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think it'll help both ways. I think it'll help strengthen, those Big Ten teams that are already recruiting and have been recruiting, the California area, especially, Ohio State, which has done well in the California and the West region. It just helps them a little bit more. But I also think it strengthens USC's position. As you just said, you're going to be able to, your parents are going to be able to see some of your games. We're playing Big Ten games. We're playing Big Ten schedule. So I think that'll help get kids to come out to California and stay there. And also it'll help in the sense that, hey, you can get to play in a national conference schedule. You get to play these big games against Penn State, Michigan, Ohio State, and you get the luxury of living in California. When they're freezing in the winter months, you could be a little bit warmer, chilling on the beach a little bit in the winter months over here in California. So I think that'll help a little bit. I know that probably doesn't seem like a really big selling point, but I think it could, when it comes down to it. Do you want to be freezing in Happy Valley, or do you want to be, in Southern California when it's 60s in the winter? So I think that could have a little bit of a difference, but USC really needs to get recruiting well in the trenches. And I think that's where the biggest impact could be, because right now they're not set up in the trenches to battle Big Ten teams and those Midwest prospects that all you guys have right now. So I think that is where they're going to have to hit it the hardest in recruiting Big Ten country offensive linemen. They're still hitting Texas pretty hard, but I think they're really going to have to put their foot down and start getting some of those bigger linemen to help them compete when they do hit the ground in 2024 in the Big Ten.
Absolutely. It's going to be interesting to see, but I do think it's going to be a benefit more for the West Coast schools. Couple more questions for you. One thing I wanted to ask, so this isn't something a lot of people are talking about, but it's not just football. It's not just basketball. It's not just women's basketball. It's non-revenue sports, baseball, it's field hockey, it's lacrosse, it's volleyball. And I think there's obviously a ton of advantages. There's probably sports where if that is going to push USC's Olympic sports, non-revenue sports, to kind of raise the bar in maybe some areas or sports where they're not as strong as some of the Big Ten schools. And then there's definitely a lot of sports where USC and UCLA are going to be traditionally a lot stronger, whether it's baseball because they can play year round in warm weather and they're getting California kids, or, volleyball is obviously really big and things like that. So I know USC's good at tennis, Ohio State's good at tennis, but I guess forget the performance, but the actual expense on those programs is going to be a lot greater, having to get USC and UCLA and vice versa, all the Big Ten schools back and forth, probably spending an extra day because of the time difference at a hotel to get acclimated. And there's going to be a lot of money that has to go invested into those non-revenue Olympic sports than maybe there was before. Obviously that will be offset by the new TV deals and things along those lines, but is that something that you feel is a bit of a problem and something that could be somewhat concerning? Like, I'm not saying they're going to drop any sports, but I mean, that could be something that different schools think about down the line because of the new expenses that come with what will eventually become like pretty much, as you said, a national schedule.
Yeah, absolutely. That's something that you're going to have to think about and kind of monitor as they go through that early part of the Big Ten schedule. Like, is this fiscally responsible for our, badminton team to finish last in the Big Ten all this time? I'm just making up a team. I don't know if they have a badminton team, but you know what I'm saying? Does it make fiscal sense for us to keep putting this team out when it's costing us X amount of dollars and we're not competing at this level? I'm curious to see how they kind of shake out all these non-revenue sports in the Big Ten. I think it's going to be interesting, seeing these West Coast athletes kind of play these Midwest sports or Midwest teams in these sports. But I'm looking at it more sort of a positive just because USC is going to be getting so much more money, $30 million compared to, the potentially $100 million that, some reports are out there with this LA market. I think they can just use that money, obviously, to help with those expenses, obviously, and then help raise the profile of these sports, give them more money, give them more funding. When I was at Maryland, we made the transition from the ACC to the Big Ten when I was a student there. And, we were cutting programs because our athletic department was struggling so much. And because we made this move, because we were getting X amount more dollars, we were able to help programs that we had to cut. We were able to help bring back some programs. We were able to fund some of the programs that were in danger of being cut. So I think the money helps heal a lot of things. So I think early on, I think I'm just looking at it like the money is going to help all these sports. And I don't think the fiscal burden of the travel is going to outweigh that right now, but it is something you're going to have to look for.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think, as you said, you're getting more money in, but how does it affect it down the road? It probably won't in the first few years, but we will see. Want to get into some, I guess, or at least a fun question, and then two more kind of just on the landscape of college football and what the Pac-12 might look like, and then we'll let you go. Fun one first. Which Big Ten school are you most excited to go visit?
Well, it's got to be my hometown Terps. I gotta go back and. No, I'm just kidding. I just do that all the time, but I will be looking forward to the first USC Maryland road trip, getting back out there. But I think it would have to be, the three of Ohio State. I've never been to that stadium, so I'm excited to catch a game there. Obviously, the Big House, Michigan. I think that is something that I need to get off my, sports fan bucket list. And then seeing a whiteout in Happy Valley. I think those are the big three ones right off the bat. Am I looking forward to the snow in Wisconsin? Probably not. I would like to see Nebraska also, but I think those are my big three, going back to Ohio State, getting to see a game there in that venue, and then Michigan, and then obviously seeing a whiteout in Penn State. Those would be my top three. And then obviously going back home would be fun.
Yeah, I was gonna say for any USC fans listening, or even you, Chris, I'm an Ohio State 2-time grad, so I'm a little biased, but I would say actually a whiteout at Penn State, if you're only going to be able to get to one in the first couple of years, that if that's, that happens to be the game where USC is playing Penn State at night in Beaver Stadium, that is an experience unlike I've ever seen before. And even Urban Meyer said the Penn State whiteout and LSU for a night game are like the two best environments he's ever experienced in college football. So I would say that one would probably be number one, although I agree with you. Get the horseshoe, get the Big House off the bucket list. And you mentioned Wisconsin. I get not wanting to go in November or early December maybe, but if somehow the Trojans are there, it's a night game in September, October, highly recommended. Jump around after the end of the third quarter is an awesome experience. So just a fun party town that, you probably have to get to, but you're kind of a Big Ten guy anyway. So you know a little bit about that, but last couple things here. So obviously this is kind of a chess move in the larger game, right? Like this isn't the end all, like we know this isn't the end, and I'm not expecting any moves immediately, but the structure of college football is clearly going to change. The Big Ten, the SEC, if this Pac-12 ACC alliance or whatever comes about, there's ultimately going to be these super conferences formed. What do you see as the future of college football from a structure perspective?
Yeah, I mean, other people have mentioned this, but I think it's sort of the AFC, NFC model. We're going to see sort of two super leagues, and that's what we're going to see. We're going to see whatever the Big Ten will be called, and then we'll have whatever the SEC is called. And I think those will be the kind of the kings of college football. And that's what it's going to look like. These two super conferences battling it out for those national championships every season. Is there room for a third one? Sure. If the Big 12 was able to poach some of the remaining Pac-12 markets, there's already been reports that they've reached out to 6 of those teams to kind of join them. And then whatever happens with the ACC and their deal, I know Clemson is obviously a very desirable program, Florida State, Miami, UNC, whatever happens, I feel like we're just moving towards the inevitable, which would be just 2 super conferences and then possibly a third one, but things have to shake out just right for the Big 12 for that to kind of go down like that.
Yeah, I agree. I think whatever it is, I think it's going to be a body not governed by the NCAA. Basically, college football is going to be its own league. And you're going to have, I don't know, 50, 60 programs maybe in there at some point, basically taking college football, slicing it in half and saying the top 60, you guys go compete. And maybe it's a 12 or 16 team playoff. There's 4 divisions, whatever the structure is. That's kind of, it's going to be very NFL like. I agree on that. Last thing, and then we'll let you go. I know you mentioned about the Pac-12 ACC alliance that's talking about. What do you think happens? Do you think that happens and they kind of form the third super conference? Do you think that eventually just like the top teams left, maybe the Oregons, the Washingtons, maybe even Arizona State could be attractive potentially? Maybe Utah, do programs like that eventually join the Big Ten, SEC, super conferences? Are they kind of left by the wayside? Is it half and half? How do you see the future of the Pac-12, excuse me?
Yeah, I think I don't want to like over exaggerate it, but I think it's a little too late for the Pac-12. I think it's over. I think we're going to be talking about the funeral of the Pac-12 in a couple of months here. You know, they've obviously, I think it all depends on what happens with these TV negotiations. You know, they just open up, make them official negotiations for TV deals, because I think all the remaining Pac-12 schools, they want to see what the offers are on the table. I think before USC, UCLA left, it was like they could get $500 million, but now it's going to drop to $300 million. So is that enough to keep them there? I don't know. I just think there's such an uphill battle for them in the Pac-12 and their structure. And I just don't think there's enough money out there for them to sort of keep those teams alive. Because if, you know, I don't know, the SEC comes calling for Oregon and they want them in, that's a no-brainer. You know, if the Big 12 is up throwing a lot more money than what they were going to get in the Pac-12, I think they're going. If Washington and their market, they want to go to the Big 12, it just makes too much sense for them to leave and look elsewhere, whether that's the Big 12 or maybe the SEC comes calling. I don't know, but I just think the Pac-12 is on its way out. I think that's just like a desperation move, obviously, but I don't think it's going to stick in the end.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's going to be a lot of movement. I don't know which way it's going to go exactly, but it's going to be really fun to watch. And I think it's going to probably come faster and more furiously than it ever has before. I think these are the first 2 dominoes, and there's going to be a lot of moves made probably over the next year to year and a half. But Chris, really appreciate you joining the show. For those listening who want to give him a follow, it's at Chris N. Trevino, Trevino. On Twitter, you can find his work at uscfootball.com. For everyone listening to Around the Oval, brought to you by Todd Pennington with Revolution Mortgage. Thanks as always, and we'll see you next week.
This episode of Around the Oval was brought to you by Todd Pennington with Revolution Mortgage. If you've been thinking about refinancing or buying a house, check out our sponsor, Todd Pennington with Revolution Mortgage. They offer low rates for refinancing and home purchase loans, including first-time home buyer programs, down payment assistance, and cash-out home equity loans. Check out revolutionmortgage.com/tpennington.